RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Call out the instigators, because there's something in the air. We got to get together sooner or later, because the revolution's here, and you know it's right. We have got to get it together. We have got to get it together now.
Trying to get it together, hey, and we're doing a okay job, I hope. It's the Nicole Sandler Show. We are broadcasting live. It is Monday, February 24th, 2014, live on the home of Nicole Sandler, of course, RadioOrNot.com, where you can participate in a free, awesome, cool conversation in the chat room there. It's all free, RadioOrNot.com. 13 people already over there chatting right now. We're live on SoFloRadio.com. We're live on TalkRadio1.com. We're live on our website, which is FilterFreeRadio.com. We're also live thanks to Kenny Pick on Liberal Justice Radio, which you can find on the TuneIn app and TuneIn.com. And however you may be joining us, it is a pleasure to be with you this morning. As you can tell, I'm not Nicole Sandler. Nicole is still enjoying her rest, her vacation. She's taking it easy in the Sunshine State in California, catching some rays, and hopefully she's got some water to drink. And I'm just kidding. Nicole is going to be back by the end of this week. You've got me, Jacob Dean, here in Portland, Oregon. We host a program called Filter Free Radio. We're going to be in today, tomorrow, and I believe Wednesday of this week for Nicole Sandler, do a couple more days for her, so she can actually get a vacation and actually take a break, recharge the batteries, all that good jazz. I want to welcome into this conversation my co-host of Filter Free Radio. He is the producer of Filter Free Radio. He is the kick-ass, all-around brother from another mother, Mr. Skeptical Scott, who is live in our nation's capital of Washington, D.C. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, good to have you on board, man. Thanks for getting up early, man. I know we don't we don't normally do our show until the evening time, so whenever Scott and I get up this early, it's kind of like, oh, well, you got your coffee? Yeah, okay, we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all good. We're going to get into it, get into the news. Lots of stuff coming up today. We're going to touch base with Talk Radio News Service, TalkRadioNews.com, get a live report in an hour from now. Live report from our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., an official accredited news bureau there, the Talk Radio News Service. Find out what's happening in Ukraine, get the latest on the conditions there, get the latest on what's going on at the White House today. There's a governor's conference with Obama, and the Pentagon might actually cut defense spending. What? Is it going to be enough? We can talk about that as well. The Pentagon is going to shrink the Army to potentially the smallest U.S. Army we've had since before World War II. What an idea. We can talk about that. We can talk about the Supreme Court of the United States and what they're considering today on the climate change and how that ties in to, well, you and I as living, breathing organisms on this planet. We're going to get all of the news from the Talk Radio News Service here in about an hour. And again, this is an opportunity for you to participate in the conversation live on the Nicole Sandler Show. I don't know how often you have that opportunity to do it, but we have a telephone number open for you, and I'm sitting right here in front of the call screen software. Yes, I play host and producer and engineer and call screen software and music producer as well on the show like Nicole does. It's independent radio, and if you want to give us a call, you're going to call our telephone number, which is scrolling across the top of your screen. It's just going to ring and ring and ring and ring, and then I'm going to pick it up. You're going to be live on the air. I don't have a call screener here in my independent studio bedroom, So if you want to call, we would love to have you tell us what you think on any number of issues in the news. 503. Our telephone number is 503-746-TALK. It's 503-746-8255. As much as I love to hear myself talk, I want to hear what you have to say. So I want you to call in, and that's what democracy is all about. That's what participation is all about. That is what is going to save the human race, is participation. So if you have a voice, you have a choice, and you can use it. So give us a call. Would love to hear from you. Let's get into what I think is the most important television that you could have watched over the weekend. Did you see this? Did you see the most recent episode of Bill Moyers and Company on public broadcasting over the weekend? What a fantastic conversation. We posted the entire interview over on our website at filterfreeradio.com. Bill Moyers interviewed Mike Lofgren. He's a 28-year congressional staffer veteran. He's been a congressional staffer in Washington, D.C. for 28 years, serving on the House and Senate Budget Committee, which is no big deal. He's a numbers man, but Mike Lofgren has come to some interesting revelations as he's been crunching the numbers, and the numbers haven't added up. And if you're like me, here where I am in Portland, Oregon, maybe your local public broadcast television station has cut back its showing of Bill Moyers and Company. We used to get a full hour of Bill Moyers once a week. Yay! 1 full hour once a week. And that has been cut back to only half an hour once a week, at least on my local public broadcasting station.
I thought that was only for this show.
No, it's an ongoing scheduled change. And unfortunately for me, like I said, I fight the Comcast and I fight the Time Warner Cable by not subscribing to them, by not giving them my money. I've never had cable. I've never had satellite TV in my entire life. I still don't. I don't want it. And that leaves me with the big networks and public television that's free broadcast television. And the only thing that is truly worth watching anymore is public broadcast television. And that is like no longer serving its purposes as it used to. You see the corporate takeover of NPR, the corporate takeover of PBS, but what little is left is on PBS, in my opinion, and even what little bit is left on PBS, it's the Bill Moyers and Company show. Moyers and Company.
I would say Moyers and Company and Frontline, and then that's it.
Right, and so I wanted to go through this conversation not only because I think it is super important to understand what is the deep state, what makes up the deep state, and how the deep state affects all of us. But this is by far the most important thing you could have watched in the last 48 hours on television. But then again, I don't have cable, so, who knows? But what I've seen in my own eyes, this is by far the most important conversation. I want to start with this. Coming up later in the show, we're going to get into that debate we talked about at Oxford University with Chris Hedges, talking about Edward Snowden. Is Edward Snowden a hero? That debate happened on last Thursday. We're going to get into that in the second hour as well. You should read Chris Hedges' article every Monday on truthdig.com, okay? All right, I want to dive into this. This is Bill Moyers and Company, the website billmoyers.com. The title of this is called The Deep State. And he's interviewing Mike Lofgren, a 28-year congressional staffer on the House and Senate Budget Committee. The entire interview is posted on the top of our website right now at filterfreeradio.com. And here is Bill Moyers' introduction into this conversation and introduces Mike Lofgren. in case you've never heard of Mike Lofgren, which I didn't before this conversation.
Mike Lofgren's no intelligence agent, although he had a top-secret security clearance. He's a numbers man, a congressional staff member for 28 years with the powerful House and Senate budget committees. Over the years, as he crunched those numbers, he realized they didn't add up. Instead, they led him to America's own deep state, where elected and unelected figures collude to protect and serve powerful vested interests. Mike Lofgren was so disgusted, he not only left Capitol Hill, he left the Republican Party and wrote this book, The Party is Over, How Republicans Went Crazy, Democrats Became Useless, and the Middle Class Got Shafted.
Oh, that is the best book title ever. So this guy, Mike Lofgren, is a former Republican, 28 years, congressional staffer, House and Senate Budget Committee, writes a book, How Republicans Became Crazy, How Democrats Became Useless, and How the Middle Class Got Shafted. Sounds about right. At that moment, I was hooked into the conversation. So what is the deep state? What does the deep state want? Here is Mike Lofgren.
It is a hybrid of corporate America and the national security state. Everyone knows what the military-industrial complex is, since Eisenhower talked about it in his farewell address. Everyone knows Wall Street and its depredations. Everyone knows how corporate America acts. They're both about the same thing. They're both about money, sucking as much money out of the country as they can, and they're about control, corporate control and political control.
So two quick things. What I love about this conversation is going to tie everything together. It's not just the NSA. It's not just Wall Street. It's not just Silicon Valley. It's all of it. And they're all in cahoots. I'm telling you, the game is rigged. And as Mike mentions there, everyone knows about the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about. Here's that clip in case you have no clue of what the military-industrial complex is. I'd be concerned if you didn't know what this was.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our rights, our civil liberties, our democracy, and guess what's happening?
We did that. We did just that.
Dun,
Wow.
Dun, dun, dun. But wait,
No.
there is a solution. We're going to get to the solution, and that's people waking up at the end of this conversation. But go ahead, Scott. Were you going to add something there?
No, I was just going to say it's how prescient Eisenhower was, and how all of this is so very predictable, considering it's a cycle. Everything's a cycle. Economies go in cycles. History goes in cycles, and so we're really reliving the 1920s all over again. I mean, with the consolidation of wealth, we have modern day robber barons. I would encourage people to go watch the movie Park Avenue on our website that I posted, where the same building on Park Avenue houses the largest concentration of billionaires, just as it did during the Industrial Revolution with all these robber barons from railroads and industry like that. Nowadays, it's Wall Street financiers, but it's the same thing. It's just money has been transitioned into a different aspect of our economy. But yeah, these people exist by sucking the lifeblood out of the poor. As Bob Marley said, the Babylon system is the vampire sucking the blood of the sufferers. And I think that's really what our capitalist system is doing to us. And that's why we no longer have much of a middle class, if at all. And that's why the rate of poverty in the world is growing faster than the rate of population. The rate of poverty is growing faster than the rate of population growth.
Let me go to this clip, apropos of what you're talking about, Scott. This is back to this conversation with Mike Lofgren and the one, the only Bill Moyers and company. They are extracting all of the money out of the economy. And the deep state is doing this. This is not a natural progression. This is not something that normally happens. Somewhere something happens, some corruption, some tweaking, and now this is what we have. Something made it this way. And here is back to this, and this is brilliant. This 28-year congressional staffer who's been on the inside, he's been crunching the numbers, he's been working for the man for 28 years, Mike Lofgren, writing this new book, this new essay, and coming on Bill Moyer saying, we've got a problem. It's the deep state, and it's all in cahoots, and they're sucking so much money out of the economy. Here is, for example, how the money is a part of this.
The national security state, the NSA spent $1.7 billion to build a facility in Utah that will collect 1 yottabyte of information. That's as much information as has ever been written in the history of the world.
That's a lot of info.
It costs $400 by the time the Pentagon finishes paying contractors to haul 1 gallon of gasoline into Afghanistan.
For comparison.
That's a real extravagant amount of money. In both cases of the national security state,
$1.7 billion.
and the corporate state, they are sucking money out of the economy. As our infrastructure collapses, we have a tinker toy power grid that goes out every time there's inclement weather. Tens of millions of people are on food stamps. We incarcerate more people than China, an authoritarian state with 4 times our population. Does anyone see the disparity between this extravagance for the deep state and the penury that is being forced on the rest of the country? That isn't a natural evolution. Something made it happen.
You get that? And just for comparison reasons, like he said, if we want to get a gallon of gasoline into the troops in Afghanistan, by the time it's said and done, it costs $400 to do that. Meanwhile, the NSA spent $1.7 billion with a B. That's 1.7 thousand million, as Scott likes to mention, because million and billion just kind of sound the same, right? It's $1.7 thousand million on the Super Information Storage Center in Utah.
Wow. I have to disagree with him a little bit right there, because I think it is a natural progression of fascism. This is how fascism works.
Sure.
They suppress, they extract from the least among us, they incarcerate, imprison, obviously oppress those who would resist. And let's face it, the first people who resist are those who are the most oppressed, and that is the poor in urban cities. And that's why we have more minorities in prison than we do anything else, even though minorities obviously don't make up a large population of our country. And so what happens is the poorer you are, the more likely you are to be in prison, because the more likely you are to resist. And so it's the natural progression of fascism. I mean, when you have fascistic tendencies, this is what happens. Now, he's right. It's not a natural, organic thing that happens out of the evolution of what we would, I guess, consider, growth, prosperous growth of a society. But it's just obviously when concentration of wealth happens and people are oppressed and cast aside, they are a danger to those who are wealthy because they know better than anybody how the system really works.
Exactly. And you might ask yourself, well, why is this story a big deal? Why is this deep state a big deal? The reason it's a big deal is because it connects everything that we've been talking about together. It connects Wall Street. It connects the military-industrial complex. It connects the national security complex and Silicon Valley all into, well, it exposes transparency of what is going on behind the scenes. This is already happening behind the scenes, and essentially what we are given is and it's not a conspiracy theory. This is the crazy thing about it. He's laying out that there are really essentially are two different governments here. We have a visible government that we see, that we learn about in Civics 101, that we can all agree is gridlocked, right? But then you have this almost invisible government that's operating kind of behind the scenes. And, anytime we talk about, education budgets or transportation budgets or infrastructure budgets, we hit that gridlock. But anytime we need to go into Libya to bomb people, anytime we need
There's
to
endless money for war.
anytime we need to bring down an airplane with a different country's president on it because we think that they've got NSA documents on it, we can do that. No gridlock
man,
there.
They thought he had Edward Snowden on it. Remember?
Yeah, right.
I mean, that was totally criminal. I can't believe nothing's been done about that from the UN or from The Hague. I mean, it's just talk about fascism.
Right.
It's just.
And what our job is, we have to expose that hypocrisy and expose the difference between what they say and what they show us. And this is what's going on, and then what is actually going on. Here,
Yeah, but one second, it works the same as any organized crime syndicate. The mafia and these things always had legitimate storefronts, but out of the back of their Italian restaurant or out of the back of whatever so-called front that they had, they were running all this illegal activity. And that's what we have here in our economy. That's what we have, in our so-called democracy, which quote-unquote democracy. We have the facade of what they want us to believe and what is just sort of it's a facade. And then they have what's really happening, which is obviously behind the scenes, which is something you and I are not meant to know about.
Right.
So,
and here is this former insider, Mike Lofgren, who spent 28 years as a congressional staffer on the House and Senate Budget Committee. He's been behind the scenes, as a worker bee for the man, doing this for almost 30 years, and he's finally figured out, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here. And here's Mike talking about the difference between those two governments. The visible government that we see, that they want us to see, that's gridlocked, and the invisible, what's really going on behind the scenes. Check this out.
Well, that's just the thing. The common narrative of the last 5 years, and on a superficial level, it's right, is that government is broken, it's dysfunctional, it's gridlocked. Well, that's true, and that is the visible government, the constitutional government we learn about in Civics 101, and it is gridlocked. But somehow Obama can go into Libya, he can assassinate U.S. citizens, he can collect all our phone records without a by your leave from anyone. He can even bring down a jet carrying a president of a sovereign country without asking anyone's permission, and no one seems to connect the two. The failure of our visible constitutional state and this other government that operates according to no constitutional rules or any constraint by the governed.
What will tip the threshold of people getting active is awareness of violation of our constitutional rights. Once people wake up and realize, hey, wait a minute, we're getting shafted here, people get upset when they realize they're getting shafted. How do you get so many people to vote against their own best interest, to work against their own best interest, to not even realize their own best interest? Well, propaganda. It works. And here is, just 20 seconds, another clip from Mike Lofgren. Why is this such a big deal? How does it tie everything together? This is the deep state in which we are suppressed under.
It is the big story of our time. It is, I would say, the red thread that runs through the history of the last 3 decades. It's how we had deregulation, financialization of the economy, the Wall Street bust, the erosion of our civil liberties, and perpetual war.
If you are tired, as I am, are you tired of fascism and capitalism? Then it's time for us to get active. And you're not alone. You're not alone. The people have the power. Please check out last Filter Free Radio episode number 106, how we fix the problem of fascism and capitalism? The answer is successful social movements. And that video is at the top of filterfreeradio.com if you're interested. I
Or you can
know.
go back and listen to Saul Alinsky.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people are tired of the fascism and capitalism because I tweeted that out over the weekend, a link to that show, and I tweeted, "Are you tired of hashtag fascism and hashtag capitalism? Then it's time to get active. Here's how we do it." That by far has been our most popular tweet ever since we've been on Twitter in 3
Really?
years. It's been retweeted like 20 times, and it's been
No
favorited
way.
like 10 times.
That's so cool, dude.
Yeah, it's super cool. People get it, and people are tired of this crap.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, even if I talk to my friends and family, and they just say, "Oh, Obama's the worst president," or "He's so ineffective," or "Congress is so obstructive," and they're not doing their jobs, quote unquote, doing, and I say, well, who are they not doing their jobs for? Because what's really happening is they're incredibly effective. They're being very successful at what they do. The problem is it's just not what we understand as what they're supposed to be doing. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, obviously, defense spending's up every year. Even if they say they're going to cut it now, it's really only going to be cut in terms of troops. The money is going to more automation than anything.
Drones.
Drones, of course. Everything's been automated. You don't need boots on the ground. You can kill with impunity from the sky. So what do you need more bodies for?
Just ask anyone who works in radio.
Yeah, exactly. So everything's being automated. So with technology. So, I mean, you have these large expenditures and bailouts. I mean, let's face it, Obamacare is nothing but a bailout to the insurance and pharmaceutical industry, when the real problem is the insurance and pharmaceutical industry. We're the only country in the world, the first world countries anyway, of the 28 OECD countries that does not guarantee healthcare as a right and not a privilege. And so you say, oh, well, it's the best they could do. Well, yeah, considering their constraints, because they're working for these very wealthy business interests. They're not working for you and I. They're throwing you and I occasional scraps, and more often than not, they're not even doing that. They're actually taking away from us in the form of jobs, in the form of social safety net. I mean, Medicaid has been privatized. I just recently qualified for Medicaid, thinking that I would have state coverage for my insurance. Well, I was up until February 14th when they turned it over to a private insurance company. and this is Medicaid. This is healthcare for the very poor. So, not Medicare. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. I thought I had single payer Medicaid through the government. They're like, well, yeah, no, now you have this insurance company. Oh, also in a separate dental company. The state just pays them for you. So it's the privatization of Medicaid. I mean, it's literally the evisceration of our social safety net and the privatization of everything. I mean, everything has a commodity. And so these people, these so-called elected officials, which are really just puppets. I mean, it's like Bill Hicks or George Carlin say, forget the puppets. They're just there to give you the idea you have, an option. You do not. These people work for. They're very wealthy. And so it's incumbent upon us to realize what is happening to us and to resist and to find ways to resist and to protest and to not be sucked into the he said, she said daily back and forth and machinations in the corporate media. And the corporate media is there, of course, to keep us passive. They're not there to inform us. They're not going to tell you the real story. They're not going to
Why
tell
would
you
they
that
work against their own best interest?
Right, exactly, because their job is to make money off advertising sales. So they're not going to criticize ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is one of the big advertisers, et cetera, et cetera. And all these companies, when you see Lockheed Martin and these companies advertise on television, that you're like, okay, who is their target audience? Because I'm not going to buy a fighter jet. I'm not going to buy, some gas drilling rig. And what does natural gas have to do with me? I'm not going to buy, So it's like they're paying off the so-called multimedia corporations. And let's face it, the multimedia corporations, there's only 4 of them now. Soon to be 4. It's about 5, but they're all very wealthy and for profit. They're not in our best interest. So really it's time to shut off the poison, to start to seek from other voices that are outside the so-called mainstream, and to listen to our history. I mean, this has all been happening before, and yet we've all forgotten it. And it's time to remember our history and time to do something about it.
Hell yeah, I'm with you, man. It's like when you go to the puppet show. Puppet shows are for kids, right? Kids and young children pay attention to the puppets because they're like attractive and entertaining and fun. And then the adults kind of pay attention to the people behind the puppets, the puppeteers, taking a look at what's going on behind the scenes, noticing when they like make a mistake behind the scenes. It's kind of funny, right? Anyways, I'm just saying, we got to run to a short break here at the bottom of our first hour. If you're just joining us, Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott from Filter Free Radio in for Nicole Sandler. Nicole is getting a much-needed vacation, taking it easy. And when we come back on RadioOrNot.com on the Nicole Sandler Show, we're going to continue this conversation of what is the deep state and how it's taking over you and me and this country. What are we going to do about it? Next on the Nicole Sandler Show.
RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or not?
Radio or not?
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
I really hope, just for the sake of your privacy, that you didn't get a new computer from Amazon for Christmas. This is really disturbing. The NSA's been running around, don't buy any computers from China. They might be putting spyware and bugs in your computers before you get them so they can spy on you. Come buy computers from us here in America.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
The good old US of A and the NSA wants to watch what you're doing all of the time, and they don't care about your constitutional rights. Just keep that in mind.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
The uber-rich are full of ideas. Not, unfortunately, ideas to help humanity, but to help themselves grab more money and power at our expense. Take Tom Perkins. He's one of a growing number of the put-upon rich. Billionaires who've grabbed a fabulous fortune by hook or crook, but now complain that they are victims of a rising tide of hatred. Excuse me, Tom, but the words billionaire and victim are not a natural pairing. Yet, even though he candidly concedes that he lives a life of vulgar excess, Perkins wrote a sob-story letter in January to the Wall Street Journal pleading for relief from the, quote, war on the American 1%, namely the rich. He was roundly ridiculed for that, but he's since come back with a pragmatic idea for redressing the grievous plight of the put-upon 1%ers. What's needed, he explained, is a slight tweaking of America's democratic election system. The Tom Perkins system, he lectured, is you don't get to vote unless you pay $1 of taxes. But what I really think is it should be like a corporation. You pay $1 million in taxes, you get 1 million votes. How's that? Gosh, so much vanity and ignorance crammed into only 3 sentences. Apparently, no one has informed Tom that poor people pay a larger percentage of their income in various taxes than do privileged tax evaders like him. Nor does he seem aware that a democratic government cannot be anything like a corporation, for government must serve the whole public, while a corporation is an autocratic hierarchy that serves only a few. And golly, Tom, why should you and all of your billionaire buddies get anything special, like extra votes, just for paying taxes? What you get in return for taxes is what we all get, civilization. This is Jim Hightower saying, I thought I would write to Tom about his plan, but then I realized I don't know how to spell.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to The Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Greg Palast, I realized as we were talking that actually we were supposed to do this on Wednesday, so thank you so much for bearing with me.
Well, I am thrilled that we were doing that. You've jumped the other characters. Because, Nicole, I just think that your show is brilliant, and I want to thank you because my stuff may be prime time in Britain, but here I keep slamming into the electronic Berlin Wall, and you have snuck me across and into the information stream. And I hope that your listeners are aware of how important and precious your program is. So I want to thank you.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at radioornot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. Questioning authority daily. The Nicole Sandler Show.
It's Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott of Filter Free Radio. An honor and privilege to be in for Nicole Sandler live on RadioOrNot.com, SoFloRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com, our website, FilterFreeRadio.com, and Liberal Justice Radio on the TuneIn app and TuneIn.com. Just to mention real quick, we don't normally do 5 shows in 1 week. We normally do 1 show per week. And since we're helping out Nicole, we're doing all of this stuff for Nicole, we're going to take off tonight from our normal broadcast of Filter Free Radio. It would just be essentially what we talk about on when we fill in for Nicole. We talk about the NSA, we talk about social movements, we talk about activism, we talk about mobilizing the people, changing the status quo, and actually real solutions and real means for the people to get active and to do so. And so we're going to take tonight off. Don't tune in tonight because there's not going to be a live Filter Free Radio. We're doing it now. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it on Wednesday. We did it last week. Do it live. And it's an honor to be in for Nicole Sandler. And I think we might be doing something right somehow because we keep getting asked back. We got 25 people in the chat room at RadioOrNot.com hanging out. Somebody somewhere is digging it. So thank you. I really appreciate that. You can give us your feedback, anything you ever want to tell us. All the contact info scrolling across the top of your screen. And real quick, I want to mention one of my favorite websites is Democracy Now! Because they're just awesome, and they tell it like it is. They're good stuff. Watch Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman on a daily basis. It's real independent journalism. It's just like you come to the Nicole Sandler Show here at RadioOrNot.com because you're already looking for that truth. You're looking for the alternative, independent media outlet that is willing to tell you what is really going on. That's why you love Nicole Sandler. That's why you would love Filter Free Radio. I strongly suggest you check out Democracy Now! And I just mentioned that because Democracy Now! Is doing this cool thing where you can take a picture of yourself and hold up a little sign that says why you need Democracy Now! And you could do a little video, and I did it. I did one for us and posted it on Democracy Now!'s website because it is their 18th birthday this week. Democracy Now! Turns 18 years old, and they want to know, why do you need Democracy Now!? And you can, do that, take a picture of yourself, do a selfie, and hold up your sign of why you need Democracy Now! I'll tell you why. I need Democracy Now! Because Democracy Now! Goes to where the silence is. They hold powerful accountable. They are not a party to the parties. They are a check and balance on real power. They are daily independent journalism, and they bring us that much closer to Democracy Now! So, much love. All right.
And it's remarkable, too. The transition in my worldview by shutting out the poison of the corporate media and just watching. My main news source is commondreams.org, and my main video daily news broadcast is democracynow.org, and it's what your nightly news used to be. I mean, the headlines on Democracy Now! Are definitely not the headlines on the corporate media. And the things that they talk about in depth and cover in depth, and the people that they interview are certainly people who will never be on the corporate media. And the sides of the stories that they tell are far more, I would say, truthful and more well-rounded than you will ever hear in any kind of corporate media outlet. And it's really important for us to have this news source because it really is the only one that does an hour news broadcast and interviews people who are not allowed on corporate television. Other than maybe the Real News Network, but even they just do interviews and they do news stories. They don't do an hour-long news broadcast live every day.
Right on. Lava Q in the chat room mentions at RadioOrNot.com that I've sent Democracy Now! A couple of bucks, and I'm on Amy's mailing list. So, hey, way cool.
Yeah. They started off just as a news show. I mean, as a radio show. on small radio affiliates in like 5 or 6 cities nationwide. Last Friday, they played their very first broadcast, at least the opening introduction of it, and they were, I think, in like 5 cities in the country on Pacifica Radio, and that was it. And now they're actually a video broadcast show on some public television, but they're obviously their media spread, their news outlets are a lot greater than they once were. But still, when I tell people these stories that I've heard, and they say, "Well, where'd you hear that?" I didn't hear that. I didn't see that on the nightly news. And I was like, I watch Democracy Now! Every day. Oh, I didn't hear that. It's like, so it's really the difference of being informed versus misinformed or even disinformed, as is what's true for the nightly news.
Yeah, no shit, right? And it comes back to understanding the idea that our best interest is different from the best interest of the government or the best interest of these corporate media propaganda pushers. Their best interest is to make as much money as they possibly can, to get as many eyeballs to look at whatever they're showing. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's sexy or as long as it's a cute little puppy. They get the eyeballs, they get the ad revenue. That's all that matters. And your best interest might be different from that. Mine is. Anyways, back into a conversation. The best conversation I found on all TV over the weekend, and I hope you saw this. If you didn't, we posted a link to it on our website. This is from BillMoyers.com. Bill Moyers and Company interviewed Mike Lofgren, 28-year congressional staffer on the House and Senate Budget Committee. Mike Lofgren's recently come out with a new book titled How Republicans Became Crazy, How Democrats Became Useless, and How the Middle Class Got Shafted. Good stuff. And we're talking about the deep state. What is the deep state? The deep state is what we live in. The deep state is the connection between the military-industrial complex, the national security complex, Silicon Valley, corporate media, and it goes on and on and on and on. It's all connected. As you have suspected for a long time, it is all connected. The system is rigged. And we have someone, a former insider, who's coming out, got a new book out, got a new essay out, making the media rounds saying, hey, this isn't a conspiracy theory anymore. 20, 30 years ago, there's two governments and there's a secret invisible government and, that guy's crazy. Better get out the tinfoil hats, right? 30, 40 years later, now that we have proof that did not come voluntarily from those who are doing the corruption. No, that proof came from Edward Snowden. But now that we have proof, time to do something about it. And exposing the deep state, yes, it means deep doo-doo. We're in deep doo-doo. Exposing the deep state also means specifically laying out who is the deep state and who makes up the deep state. Here's back to Mike Lofgren.
Well, it's all the national security functions of the government. It's the Pentagon, it's Homeland Security, it's the State Department. It's also Treasury because they have a kind of symbiotic relationship with Wall Street.
For one thing, they control the flow of money.
Absolutely. And that's why there's such a flow not only of money but of personnel between Wall Street and the Treasury Department.
And that's a big deal. Scott and I were talking about that before the break. Not only is there too much money, but the revolving opening doors between government and between Wall Street is a big problem. Here is an example. Look at David Petraeus, for example. Here's Mike Lofgren laying out how this is a big problem and part of the deep state.
Wall Street is perhaps the ultimate backstop to the whole operation because they generate so much money that they can provide second careers for a lot of the government operatives. They're going to make more money than they ever dreamed they would on Wall Street. And I think a good example of that is the most celebrated soldier of the last decade, David Petraeus. What did he do when he retired? He went to Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, a Wall Street buyout firm with $90 billion in assets under management.
And Petraeus is not the only one. I mean, now it's like if a former congressman or former senator or former head of the military does not go into the private sector, into Wall Street, it's like that's more news than if they do, because it's so common now that that's what it is. Folks in the chat room at radioornot.com are talking about Chris Hedges. We're going to get into Chris Hedges and his new article that came out today on truthdig.com here in about 15 minutes after we touch base with the Talk Radio News Service and get all of the happenings in the news at the top of the hour. This is frightening. And Scott, I want to play this clip and then I want you to speak to this because you are a native Washington, D.C. Washingtonian. And
That's right.
That's right. He's a man. And in D.C. there. And this is Mike Lofgren speaking to Bill Moyers, since 9/11, we have built the equivalent of 3 Pentagons in Washington, D.C. Scott, I want you to talk about this after this clip real quick.
Since 9/11, we have built the equivalent of 3 Pentagons around the D.C. metropolitan area, holding defense contractors, intelligence contractors, and government civilians involved in the military-industrial complex. There are over 400,000 contractors, private citizens, who have top-secret security clearances.
Do you want to speak to that? Because you're there, and you get to see it.
I've also talked to quite a few of those people. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, considering the downturn in our economy on a nationwide basis, if you drive through D.C., you wouldn't know it. The construction that's going on, there's just building after building after building. I mean, in one area of downtown D.C., actually, near Union Station in Chinatown, there's at least a half dozen high-rise buildings being built in what was historically poor minority neighborhoods, but they've of course been pushed out, and their homes have been torn down, and now we have this mixed use. In fact, there's a Walmart that was finally built right there, which tells you how things have gone, because the city of D.C. spent 12 years fighting Walmart to keep them out of the city, and now there's 3 Walmarts that were just built inside D.C. So, just as an example. And in these mixed-use buildings, you have just apartments. I mean, it's like, where are all these apartments coming from? Why is there this need for dozens and dozens of new high-rise, high-density apartment buildings in such a bad economy? And you see all these young professionals walking around in these these gentrified parts of town, and they're all working for the government. They're all government, government by extension. Government employees through the form of course, contractors, right. And they're all young, and they're all fresh out of college, and they're all the ones who are drinking the Kool-Aid and not asking the tough questions as to what they're doing. And you better believe that most of them are, of course, part of the military-industrial complex in some way, whether it's being an intelligence analyst for Stratfor or whatever, or working for some sort of think tank, be it the Heritage Foundation or any one of these pseudo what they call NOC. What's it called? There's an acronym for it. It's NGOs, non-government organization. But of course, they do function as government agencies essentially for what their work is. And so it's remarkable. I mean, in a time of skyrocketing unemployment and the slashing of wages, you have this younger generation in this area anyway, who are, of course, desperate, because let's face it, if you're coming out of college, you got $100,000 in student loan debt, you're going to take whatever you can get, and you'll sell your soul to do it, because you already have, of course, you're an indentured servant. And so it's just amazing, because these parts of town, I mean, are just, you drive through, it's like projects, vacant lots. Oh my God, look, there's a dozen new high-rise buildings that look brand new and sparkling and have mixed use, with national chain restaurants going in on the first floor, apartments going in on the top floors. And then, of course, next to that is a brand new office building that's, for whatever government contractor needs to be downtown near Capitol Hill or near the State Department or near any one of these agencies in which they work with and or lobby. And it's remarkable. I mean, the influx of young white college graduates into D.C., which is a historically black city, black lower income city for that matter, is just staggering. And you drive around, and of course the streets are all fucked. I mean, the streets are so chewed up from the construction and from obviously the just lack of maintenance on the infrastructure as a whole. you're just tearing your car up driving over potholes. But look, there's a brand new shiny building and a brand new Walmart and a brand new Ruby Tuesdays and all these brand new chain restaurants, and it's disgusting. Oh, and even worse is there's a brand new NPR building, $200 million NPR building, shiny with all the glittering, scrolling LED screens and all that good stuff, right there across the street from the projects, and it's the dichotomy, and it's staggering, and people don't get it. No one seems to understand.
Yep. And I remember one of the things that stood out to me most about living there in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years when I did, working for Tom Hartman program, that like in most cities, generally speaking, like different neighborhoods you can tell the difference in the status as far as income and wealth. You got the poor neighborhood, the ghetto and all the minorities and all the violence and poverty, and usually specific areas of towns. And then in other areas, you have like here in Portland, west side of the Willamette, it's all good. East side of the Willamette, where I am, and
pretty much east side of every city in the country is like that.
But what stood out to me about Washington, D.C. is it doesn't vary, like the status, income, and income and status and wealth. It doesn't vary by like neighborhoods. It varies by like block. Like one block is really bad, and then the next block is just great.
Right, and that's what's happening because as the gentrification and the expansion of the so-called corporate state and these new construction buildings are going up, they're literally, where are they going to get the real estate from but from the poor neighborhoods, because they don't have the ability to resist.
Bingo.
They're not building a new high-rise mixed-use condominium in Georgetown, which has all these historic homes and all the very rich white people live there. They're not doing it there. They're doing it over in Northeast D.C., which has historically been sort of an industrial pocket or just home to all the projects. And they've torn down a lot of the projects to build these mixed-use, high-income condominiums. And it's shocking when you drive down these streets. In parts of town, there's parts of town that I remember growing up, man, you never want to go there. You're like, wow, we're in the wrong part of town, we better turn around, And now you go there. You go there because there's all good restaurants, and there's all, and there's things to do, and there's obviously shops, and there's an arena, a sports arena. Yeah, look at Chinatown, the Verizon Center in the Chinatown district. Obviously Chinatown was historically a lower income area, and now it's home to Starbucks and, Walgreens and Walmart and you name it. All these corporate interests have moved in, and they've just pushed out.
And the Verizon Center.
And lower income, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And the lower income people have been forced to move out.
Yeah.
And so and of course, if you talk to DC natives, they're pretty bitter about the gentrification that's happened, because it means they can no longer afford to live there, obviously because the real estate skyrocketed, or their neighbor's house has been split up into a duplex and of apartments instead of being just a single family home, et cetera, and there's nowhere to park. The roads are terrible. It's just the litany of things that make it unlivable for people of lower income.
Right. And here, since 9/11, we have built essentially the equivalent of 3 more Pentagons in Washington, D.C. And you tell me that there is not a national security complex issue going on. I want to wrap up this conversation before we get to the top of the hour from the Bill Moyers and Company, BillMoyers.com, on your local public broadcasting television stations. Bill, over the weekend, interviewed Mike Lofgren. He's a 28-year-old, or excuse me, not 28-year-old. He's worked for 28 years as a congressional staffer in the House and Budget Committee. Got a new book out, How Republicans Became Crazy, Democrats Became Useless, and the Middle Class Got Shafted. He was on Bill Moyers over the weekend talking about the deep state. If you missed that, it's on our website at filterfreeradio.com. And this, I think, is the most important revelation of the whole conversation. It's that Mike Lofgren did not come and arrive at this conclusion instantly, right? He's been doing this for 28 years, and it's been a slow, gradual progression. Scott and I have talked about on our show how, you got to start somewhere. When I was 19 years old and got hired by the Thom Hartmann program, I didn't care about politics. I didn't know there was such thing as politics. And I was totally into we're the Democrats. Democrats are great. Republicans are bad. And it was Democrats versus Republicans. He said, she said.
My team, your team.
My team, your team for 2-3 years for me. And then I realized, wait a minute, why do we keep doing this? Why is it we keep changing the players, but the game hasn't changed? Now that I've been paying attention for 5-6 years, it's like, wait a minute, this isn't the solution here. And what I've done is I've deviated myself from the mainstream, from the popular, culture that says, oh, you need to watch MSNBC and you need to watch Fox and you need to be concerned about what he said and she said and Donald Trump. Who gives a fuck? You have to break free from that and find the truth. And it is only in alternative, independent, truth-telling outlets like this one. And this is Mike Lofgren talking about how he arrived over a gradual period of time at his conclusion and how he had to break free from groupthink.
At the end of 2001 is we appropriated a lot of money, and it didn't seem to be going to Afghanistan, the proximate source of the 9/11 attacks. It seemed to be going to the Persian Gulf region. And I said, what's going on here? Saddam Hussein didn't bring down the Twin Towers. So the little light went on. And I began to sort of disenchant myself from the normal groupthink that tends to take over in any organization.
Groupthink. At some point in your essay, you talk about how groupthink drives the deep state.
It absolutely does, just as it tends to drive any bureaucratic organization.
What do you mean by groupthink?
Well, the psychologist Irving Janis called it groupthink. It's a kind of assimilation of the views of your superiors and your peers. It's becoming a yes man. And in many respects, it's an unconscious thing.
Do you get that? How many of us become yes man and we don't even realize it? I did it at my previous job, and you
have to be able to fill in the blanks.
And you get I'm sorry, and you get so stuck into the routine of the day-to-day that you don't even realize what's going on. You don't even get into like the content of what's going on. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah, you're not able to ask the hard questions. It's funny when things, and I figured this out only after a long time of watching MSNBC and et cetera, that when you start to ask yourself, well, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense, and you start to realize that it makes perfect sense if you understand what their motivations are. They're doing what their corporate overlords want them to do, and that's why they are so gridlocked and so ineffective for the so-called people. No, they're completely effective. They're doing exactly what they're told, and they're extremely effective for the 1%, or actually 1/10 of 1%, for which they work.
They're doing their job and not deviating from the group think. I got 2 short clips. I'm going to try to fit them in before the top of the hour. This is Mike Lofgren on the ideology of the deep state and how it leads to perpetual war, and this is so important. This is exactly where we are right now.
It's an ideology. I just don't think we've named it. It's a kind of corporatism. Now, the actors in this drama tend to steer clear of social issues. They pretend to be merely neutral servants of the state, giving the best advice possible on national security or financial matters. But they hold a very deep ideology of the Washington consensus at home, which is deregulation, outsourcing, deindustrialization, and financialization, and they believe in American exceptionalism abroad, which is boots on the ground everywhere. It's our right to meddle everywhere in the world, and the result of that is perpetual war.
And is there solution? What is the solution?
I think we're starting to see some discord in the ideology of the factions that make up the deep state. We're seeing Silicon Valley jump ship. They are starting to protest against the NSA. We're seeing the Tea Party bailing out against the deep state. They may be wrong on many economic issues,
and they are,
but I don't think they're necessarily wrong on this one.
No, they're not.
So the public could be growing wise?
And we are.
I think they are. There's a much more vivid debate going on in the country about surveillance ever since the revelations by Edward Snowden.
You can watch the entire episode of that Bill Moyers and Company on our website at filterfreeradio.com and billmoyers.com with Mike Lofgren. I really enjoyed that conversation yesterday. I thought it was the most important thing I saw on TV all weekend long, and I wanted to share that with you because if you're like me, your local PBS station has cut back their showing of Bill Moyers and Company to only 30 minutes once a week. That's not enough, especially not enough when it's the most important conversation on television right now. And that takes us to the top of the hour. It's 8 o'clock on the West Coast, 11 a.m. on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., where we check in with the Talk Radio News Service, talkradionews.com, this morning on the Nicole Sandler Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
And good morning. Who do we have on the line there with us?
Good morning, Victoria Jones here. How are you?
Doing well, Victoria. Victoria Jones, senior White House correspondent at Talk Radio News Service. Victoria, always a pleasure to hear from you. What's happening in the news this morning?
Oh, there's a great deal going on today. The Supreme Court rejected 3 appeals from gun rights advocates today, leaving intact federal and state laws that place special restrictions on young adults. This was really interesting. They refused to question a federal law that prohibits licensed dealers from selling handguns to people under age 21. The court also let stand a Texas measure that bars people ages 18 to 20 from getting concealed carry licenses unless they're current or honorably discharged members of the military. Now, the NRA challenged both laws, and in a third case, the court refused to permit a suit over a U.S. law that bars dealers from selling a handgun to someone who lives in a different state.
Is this all because of, all the recent shootings that have been happening, right?
They don't give reasons.
Okay.
And I think it's highly unlikely.
Okay. Sure. Makes sense, I guess.
I mean, I don't think that they would base their decisions on shootings or anything like that. I think they would base their decisions on, on what they think the law is, what the Constitution is. So it's very interesting. There are some other gun cases possibly coming up, but that's one. Also, the dean of Congress, a man who served 58 years, Representative John Dingell, Democrat of Michigan, is leaving. Mm-hmm. He served for longer than anyone else in United States history.
Wow.
He said he will not seek re-election this fall. He's held seats since 1955.
Wow.
I'm not going to be carried out feet first, he says. He's going to be 88 in July. I don't want people to say I stayed too long. He says his health is good enough that I could have done it again. My doctor says I'm okay, and I'm still as smart, as capable as anyone on the Hill. He said, I find serving in the House to be obnoxious. It's become very hard because of the acrimony and bitterness, both in Congress and in the streets. He says, poisonous partisanship and a growing disregard for serving the interests of people have taken the joy out of the job. This is not the Congress I know and love. It's hard for me to accept, but it's time to cash it in. Yeah, these are quite extraordinary statements from someone who has served there for 58 years. They really are.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no better way to go out, in my opinion. I mean, you go out on top. That's the way to do it. So.
Yeah, no, he's definitely going out on top.
Okay.
Egypt's interim prime minister has announced the resignation of his cabinet. This is a surprise move, and it could pave the way for the country's military chief, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, to declare his candidacy for president. So he didn't. Hazem el-Badlawi did not give a specific reasons for the decision, which is interesting. He acknowledged the economic and security issues faced by the cabinet, but he said the country's in a much better place than when he first took office, which you would think would be a reason for him to stay. But he did not say that. So they're all going. They plan in Egypt to hold a presidential election in April, followed by a vote for a new parliament as part of the post-Morsi transition plan. And by the way, they have recently, or just now, actually started accusing Morsi of spying for Iran, in addition to all the other things they're accusing him of. President Obama this morning is meeting with the nation's governors. They were in town all weekend for the National Governors Association annual meeting. He's meeting with them at the White House. There will be plenty to discuss, things they're going to agree and disagree on. He has an agenda that he wants to get across. Republicans intend to make their presence felt. And then there are issues on which the governors are united and disagreeing on with the president on. They expected to offer a united front on some issues of common concern. One of them is a fear of cuts in National Guard forces that they say would badly damage their capacity to respond to natural disasters and other problems at home. Also, even though they disagree on the health care law, Democratic governors say they're in agreement with Republican counterparts in urging the administration to find ways to streamline the process for approving waivers that will give states more flexibility to manage the Medicaid program.
Okay.
Also today, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is going to announce plans to shrink the U.S. Army to its smallest forces before World War II.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's been a while since they've done something. Is there what's behind that, Victoria?
Well, it's partly as a result of the end of two wars, and also a sort of shift from post 9/11, and also because of budget cuts. There is a budget in place as a result of the budget deal made last December, and he has to implement them. Right. He has to implement that. And so as a result of that budget cut, those budget cuts, he's going to have to make adjustments. And part of it is going to be major cuts to the number of forces in the Army, and also changes in terms of actual hardware. And also in terms of there's going to be a one-year salary freeze for general and flag officers. Basic pay for military personnel would rise by 1%. After 2015, raises in pay will be similarly restrained. Also call for slowing the growth of tax-free housing allowances for military personnel. Reduce the direct subsidy provided to military commissaries. That's likely going to make goods more expensive. It proposes an increase in health insurance deductibles and some co-pays for some military retirees and some family services of active servicemen. There are no changes to retirement benefits for those currently serving. It maintains the current number of aircraft carriers at 11 for a year. It protects money for special operations forces and cyber warfare. Calls for retiring the famed U-2 spy plane in favor of a remotely piloted plane called the Global Hawk. And this budget is expected to be opposed by members of Congress, some for general reasons, but some because There are either people in their districts who are going to be impacted because they are members of the armed forces, or because they have things that are being built in their districts that are going to be impacted. The National Guard will oppose it, state governors will oppose it, and the defense industry is going to oppose it. So you name it, people are going to oppose it. But the Joint Chiefs are supporting him on this.
Very fascinating. I know a lot of folks have been wanting defense spending to be a part of the cuts conversations that have been going on. And, hey, maybe it's going to happen now. So I guess we'll see, huh?
Yes.
Victoria Jones with the Talk Radio News Service, the chief White House correspondent of TalkRadioNews.com. Victoria Jones, thank you so much for the brilliant reporting, and it's always great to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, have a good one. Thanks again, Victoria.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that's interesting. You know, when we come back, let's take a short break here on the Nicole Sandler Show, get a quick coffee warm-up. We'll come back. We'll get into Chris Hedges and his article on Truthdig, but I want to talk about that defense spending cuts for just a minute as well. We'll take your calls, 503-746-TALK. Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott at Filter Free Radio. We are in for Nicole Sandler live at RadioOrNot.com, and we will be right back.
The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks. I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
It's always a questioning and challenging of one's own personal held beliefs. You just run with these assumptions that you hold and you don't challenge them on a daily basis, then you'll never change and you'll never evolve your understanding of what's really happening. The more I read, the more I learn. I started off, in 2008, I campaigned door to door for Obama. I gave him $200 and I have a t-shirt that says it.
Hey.
It says God hope, right? And so nowadays I see the folly in supporting these dead institutions because there's so many blanks that need to be filled into my understanding that I sought those understandings in alternative means. And that's how I came across the Howard Zinns and the Noam Chomskys and the Cornel Wests and the Chris Hedges and the Slavoj Žižek.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Because now when I go back and I listen to corporate media, if I'm sitting around with friends or family and watching ABC News or even MSNBC or whatever, I'm yelling at the television and they're like, shut up. And I'm like, no, pause that, because we have DVR. I'm like, here's what they're not telling you, blah, blah, blah. And here's what they said, and here's why it's happening, blah, blah. It's like the half-truths and the misdirections are just so overt when you don't imbibe in that kind of nonsense on a daily basis. Shutting out the poison is a very important first step.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Salvatore Calalori. On the O'Reilly Factor, Bill O'Reilly interviewed Girl Scouts spokeswoman Kelly Parisi to discuss whether the organization had begun, quote, leaning left for hiring a former spokesman for the organization that O'Reilly claimed was a member of, quote, a controversial punk band with homosexual overtones.
When I saw that you guys paid a guy in a punk band with homosexual overtones, I'm going, is that a good choice for the Girl Scouts? You then have to understand the flack. When conservative Americans see a spokesperson for the Girl Scouts who is a member or was a member of a punk rock band with homosexual overtones, they're going, what the deuce is going on? Surely you understand that.
It's not the first time O'Reilly has worried about homosexuality in a national scouting organization. In 2004, he said it would be, quote, impossible for any children's organization to admit avowed homosexuals because of the potential liability. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Hey friends, Jacob Dean here with exciting news. You can now hear my show, Filter Free Radio, on the free Stitcher mobile app. Just download the free Stitcher app from Stitcher.com or in the App Store and search for Filter Free Radio. That's all there is to it. No syncing, no taking up memory on your device. Just Filter Free Radio on demand for you on the go. Plus, you can rate and review Filter Free Radio on Stitcher. The more you rate, review, and share us, the higher we will rank on Stitcher, and that means the more people will discover Filter Free Radio. It's never been easier to enjoy Filter Free Radio and help us spread the word. So download the free Stitcher app, search for Filter Free Radio, and start benefiting from unfiltered radical truth-telling anytime, anywhere. Thanks, and keep up the good fight.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to The Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money and politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
And welcome back to the second hour of the show. It is The Nicole Sandler Show. We are live Monday, February 24th, 2014. RadioOrNot.com, SoFloRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com, FilterFreeRadio.com, and live on Liberal Justice Radio on the TuneIn app and TuneIn.com. As you know now, Nicole Sandler is getting a very well-needed and well-deserved vacation, taking a few days off, taking a week off here. She's going to recharge the batteries, relax for a little while, and be back. Nicole's going to be back on Thursday at the end of this week. Until then, Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott here from Filter Free Radio. We host Filter Free Radio on Nicole's RadioOrNot.com Monday evenings, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. We are going to be off tonight because we're doing 5 shows with Nicole Sandler. Anytime we fill in for Nicole, we usually take off from our show because we're just like doing our show on Nicole's show. So times 5. So if you tune in tonight, we're not going to be there, but you can find all of our archives 100% free, every single episode we've ever done, every single video I've ever uploaded to YouTube, every single blog I've ever wrote, Scott's ever done. Everything that has ever been a part of Filter Free Radio is free, and it is available at filterfreeradio.com. And I'll mention a brand new, all new filterfreeradio.com is coming. So don't worry. Hey, I can't read your website. We're going to fix it. Anyways, Victoria Jones, we just touched base with Victoria Jones, Talk Radio News Service, talking about Pentagon budget cuts. And I want to get into Chris Hedges a little bit more than budget cuts, but I think it's about time that we've cut the military budget, right? Don't you think? I mean, perpetual war kind of costs money, doesn't it? We always got money for war, no money for schools, no money for infrastructure, no money for this, no money for that, but we always got war. Anyways, I'm just saying. Last Thursday, Chris Hedges opened a debate at the Oxford Union at Oxford University with this speech that I'm about to share with you. And we talked about it last week on Nicole Sandler's show. Chris Hedges was going to be debating. Chris Hedges is teamed up with William Benny, who's a former NSA official and whistleblower, and Chris Huhne, who's a former member of the British Parliament, and Anne McMahon, a former intelligence officer for the United Kingdom. Those folks were debating a team made up of Philip Crowley, who's a former U.S. State Department officer, Stuart A. Baker, he's a former chief counsel for the NSA, and Jeffrey Toobin, a TV and print commentator, and Oxford student Charles Vaughan. That was the two sides of the debate, and the debate that they were having is Edward Snowden a hero? The position taken by Chris Hedges and team was this House would call Edward Snowden a hero. And by the end of the debate, Chris Hedges' team had won the debate by an audience vote of 212 to 171. Okay? So now that I've laid that out, this is how Chris Hedges opened up the debate. And I want to read through this, and Scott, jump in as much as we want as we go through this article, which is today's article at truthdig.com. We have a link on our website and a suggestion for you to read every one of Chris Hedges' articles that comes out every Monday. He starts off writing this one, and the title of the article is Edward Snowden's Moral Courage. And this is how Chris Hedges opened the debate on Thursday, which they won, by the way. He writes, quote, "I have been to war. I have seen physical courage. But this kind of courage is not moral courage. Very few of even the bravest warriors have moral courage. For moral courage means to defy the crowd, to stand up as a solitary individual, to shun the intoxicating embrace of camaradereship, to be disobedient to authority, even at the risk of your own life for a higher principle. And with moral courage comes persecution." Clearly. And Chris Hedges goes into this example. He highlights the example of the American Army pilot Hugh Thompson, who had moral courage. He says, Chris Hedges writes, "He landed his helicopter between a platoon of U.S. soldiers and 10 terrified Vietnamese civilians during the My Lai massacre. He ordered his gunner to fire his M60 machine gun on advancing United States soldiers if they began to shoot at the Vietnamese villagers. And for this act of moral courage, Hugh Thompson, just like Edward Snowden, was hounded, character assassination attempts, and moral courage always looks like this. It is always defined by the state as treason. Because, going back to what Scott and I have been talking about, sometimes the best interest of the government is not the same as the best interest of you and me. And
it's called kill the messenger.
It's called kill the messenger. Right. And it is the courage, the moral courage. The moral courage is the courage to act and to speak the truth. Hugh Thompson had it. Daniel Ellsberg had it. Martin Luther King had it. Edward Snowden had it. What those in authority once said about them, they say now about Edward Snowden. Right?
That's correct. And they said the same thing about the Pentagon Papers, as crap. Now I'm drawing a blank
Daniel
on what his name
Ellsberg.
was. Daniel Ellsberg, yeah. I mean, they literally were on a manhunt for Daniel Ellsberg, and they were going to persecute him and prosecute him, and now he's a hero. So it's amazing how these things change with time and a much deeper understanding by the broader public of what's really happening. But then again, you have to combat the propaganda and the ideology, or the so-called ideology of the state, and of course their machinations that they can put out on the mainstream media that people believe. I mean, I talk to family members and friends who think Edward Snowden's a traitor, and I say, why? Oh, well, he gave secrets to the Russians. Well, that's not true. He did not give secrets to the Russians. He gave all his information to 2 journalists who are slowly disseminating that information. He didn't give anything to anybody else. In fact, he has nothing on him anymore. He turned it all over to Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras, who are in turn, disseminated it to the New York Times, etc. And so, but that's what he believes. It's what this individual I spoke with believes, and so because he watches the nightly news, and it's like. Or actually this person I'm speaking of actually has so-called friends on the inside who, I've talked to people who work for the Homeland Security, and this is what they say. Well, of course, those within the systems of power who are drinking the Kool-Aid are not going to seek the alternative means. They're not going to read Glenn Greenwald articles. In fact, there's been internal memos from the NSA that you can find online that Glenn Greenwald himself has published that say you're not allowed to read Glenn Greenwald articles. You're not allowed to read anything that Edward Snowden has been anything that's been published by Edward Snowden. So in other words, they want those within the systems of power who are the cogs in the wheels to not step outside of their own groupthink and to actually read what Snowden has written, because that might actually make them themselves desire to be whistleblowers. And so you have to keep people passive.
And why is that, Scott? Because it comes directly from the George Carlin clip we played on Thursday, which you posted at filterfreeradio.com. They want obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and and operate the equipment, and just dumb enough to passively accept all the shittier jobs, the increased work hours, the less pay, the decreased benefits.
Right. They don't want people to resist the system.
Got to keep people in the dark, right? If you're going to maintain evil deeds, can't shine the light on that.
Yeah, I mean, how else do you get these so-called, I hate to use a Nazi analogy, but how else do you get the Nazi youth and the brown shirts and all these people who are just, it's a group think. It is a form of brainwashing. I mean, it's a fact of the matter is, and if you read, there was a good book written a while ago, and it's free online. It was John Dean wrote, I forget what one of his books, I think it was Conscience of a Liberal or something like that, and he used the source of this one author who wrote a book called The Authoritarians, about authoritarian personalities, and it basically falls into two categories. There's authoritarians and authoritarian followers. And the fact of the matter is, most people are quite fine with being told what to do and what to think, because they don't have the energy or desire to do it themselves. And that's how you end up with this passivity, this groupthink, this people who just believe what they're told and don't question the deeper meaning of what's behind it.
I love, back to Chris Hedges' article here, which is his opening speech from this debate. He quotes G.K. Chesterton, "My country, right or wrong, is the moral equivalent of my mother, drunk or sober." Do you understand? And what that, to me, means is it's kind of like the status quo and the people who go along with the groupthink, like all of the Republicans and all the Democrats, for example. They maintain their talking points no matter what the reality is. Obama's great. Don't look at the drones and don't look at the media suppression.
It's the damn Republicans that are obstructing him from doing anything good for the people.
Right.
Right.
And it's like, if you can't constructively criticize for progress, then there's an issue, right? And I think that's what that quote's talking about. So he goes on, Chris Hedges goes on, "Let me speak to you about those who are drunk with the power to sweep up all of your email correspondence, all of your tweets, all of your web searches, all of your phone records, all of your file transfers, all of your live chats, all of your financial data, all of your medical data, all of your criminal and civil court records, all of your social movements, those who are in awash in billions upon billions of taxpayer dollars, those who have the banks of sophisticated computer systems, along with biosensors, scanners, face recognition technologies, and miniature drones, those who have obliterated your privacy and, yes, your liberty, those people are the ones who are drunk with power. There is no free press without the ability of the reporters to protect the confidentiality of those who have the moral courage to make public the abuse of power. In other words, how does a journalist make a living? A journalist makes a living by reporting stories and reporting news. Where do those stories come from and that news come from before it gets to the reporter and out to the public? It comes from a source, right? There has to be a source of the information. Back in the day, journalists used to be able to protect their information sources by keeping them anonymous. Now, you can't do that anymore. So you see the avenues of those information sources dry up because no one wants to be cracked down on for telling the truth. Some people have the moral courage, however, to do it. And you see the Edward Snowdens and the Chelsea Mannings, and you see what they're dealing with, right? And those few individuals on the inside who have dared to speak out about the system of mass surveillance have been charged as spies, labeled as traitors, hounded into exile in Ecuadorian embassies. And you have this omnipresent surveillance state. And Chris Hedges covered the East German Stasi state, so he knows what he's talking about. Our omnipresent surveillance state creates a climate of paranoia and fear. People are paranoid. Everyone's monitoring us. People are afraid. I can't speak out. I'll go to jail. And guess what? It makes democratic dissent impossible. How do you fight back against that? Any state that has the ability to inflict full spectrum dominance on its citizens is not a free state. Don't take your freedom and your rights for granted. It does not matter if it does not use this capacity today, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but history shows us if the surveillance state feels threatened, it will seek greater control. The goal, as Hannah Arendt wrote, the goal of wholesale surveillance is not to discover crimes, right? If they were if they're bugging everybody's phones, I mean, and their goal was to go discover crimes. I mean, you'd see in the news all the time, this crime got busted, this got busted, but they're not doing that because they don't care about discovering crimes. The goal of wholesale surveillance, as Hannah Arendt wrote, is to be on hand when the government decides to arrest a certain category of the population. And the relationship between those who are constantly watched and tracked and those who watch them and track them is the relationship between masters and slaves. We're going to continue this conversation of this article from Chris Hedges when we come back after a short 3-minute break on the Nicole Sandler Show, radioornot.com. Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott of Filter Free Radio, in for Nicole Sandler. Radical truth-telling. We'll be right back.
The Nicole Sandler Show.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Hey friends, Jacob Dean here with exciting news. You can now hear my show, Filter Free Radio, on the free Stitcher mobile app. Just download the free Stitcher app from Stitcher.com or in the App Store and search for Filter Free Radio. That's all there is to it. No syncing, no taking up memory on your device. Just Filter Free Radio on demand for you on the go. Plus, you can rate and review Filter Free Radio on Stitcher. The more you rate, review, and share us, the higher we will rank on Stitcher, and that means the more people will discover Filter Free Radio. It's never been easier to enjoy Filter Free Radio and help us spread the word. So download the free Stitcher app, search for Filter Free Radio, and start benefiting from unfiltered radical truth-telling anytime, anywhere. Thanks, and keep up the good fight.
Hi, this is Kenny Pick from Turn Up the Night. Here are some of the hijinks you can expect from my show.
That right-wing Republican from Texas was only helping Dennis because he thought Dennis would be easier for Joe the plumber to beat than Ken.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, a pet rock would have been better candidate than Joe the plumber. I think he might actually have been a pet rock before he was a non-plumber. So, but he was a union pet rock, never mind. Turn Up the Night with Kenny Pick, streaming live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern at Radio or Not, Talk Radio 1, Progressive Blend Radio, and KennyPick.com.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
If you look around with peak oil, with climate change, with all the natural disasters,
writings on the wall.
Yeah, they know better than even you and I know what the worst case scenario is, and so they're preparing for it. Rather than responding rationally, the power elites will not respond rationally to the climate catastrophe. Is one of the most daunting challenges we have to grasp, because it's up to us. They will do whatever they can to protect themselves, and they don't represent us. And it's the whole co-opting of, oh, you too can be rich if you just work hard enough. Well, we're not going to be rich. You never can be rich. Even if you did become rich, you won't ever be wealthy. And wealth is something totally different.
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
And wealthy is what controls a society. It controls the world. And so we have to bring pressure to bear on the wealthy.
Yeah.
And then you start talking about, how do we do that? Well, you shut down their systems of power. You stop giving them their money. You force them to listen.
Filterfreeradio.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Bill Maher, you're here in Miami on Friday night. You're doing a show at the Fillmore at the Jackie Gleason Theater. They just renamed this theater the Fillmore. And they put up a couple of psychedelic posters. So I guess...
Is it the theater Jackie did his TV show from?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What I hear they did is put up two of those old Bill Graham posters and renamed it.
Yeah, I can't think of two different icons of show business.
Yeah, really.
Bill Graham and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, why they just didn't play up the Jackie Gleason aspect, I don't know. But then again, this is South Florida.
Right. Okay.
Welcome to it.
I feel warned.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
The Nicole Sandler Show.
It is the last segment for this program, live on Monday, February 24th, 2014. The Nicole Sandler Show on RadioOrNot.com, SoFloRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com, FilterFreeRadio.com, and Liberal Justice Radio on the TuneIn app and TuneIn.com. We are talking about the article out today at truthdig.com by Chris Hedges, Scott and I's personal favorite radical truth teller and author.
He's my hero.
And today's article titled Edward Snowden's Moral Courage. This was essentially Chris Hedges' transcript from the debate at Oxford University last Thursday on whether or not Edward Snowden is a hero. If you don't know about Scott and I or Filter Free Radio, the last 10 episodes of Filter Free Radio is all about whistleblowers, all about media suppression, all about acts of courage and following your moral conscience, and
hope,
which is activism.
Hope
Getting
is
active.
action. You cannot sit there and passively hope. Passive hope is the same as wishful thinking. Active hope is setting goals and working to accomplish those goals.
If you're like, well, I mean, I'm interested in all of these topics, but I never hear anyone talk about it in the media. You're listening to the wrong media. You're watching the wrong programs. Turn off your television, turn on your computer, and find independent, alternative, radical, truth-telling outlets. We're here. We're waiting for you.
Nonprofit.
And we're with you. Yeah, nonprofit.
Nonprofit. Yeah.
We got nothing to lose.
Exactly. If there's a for-profit motive in there, then you can better believe you may not be getting the whole truth.
And I want to pick up right back into this this article. We got about 20 minutes left, Scott. And we're talking about the moral courage of Edward Snowden. And Chris Hedges writes, those who wield this unchecked power become delusional. Example, General Keith Alexander, who was the director of the NSA National Security Agency. Did you know, I had no idea until Chris Hedges wrote this, did you know that General Keith Alexander hired a Hollywood set designer to turn his command center at Fort Meade into a replica of the bridge of the Starship Enterprise so he could sit in the captain's chair and pretend that he was captain of Star Trek? Seriously.
Yeah, that was a Glenn Greenwald article about 6 months ago on Common Dreams about that. Yeah, complete with a couple pictures. Yeah, that's your tax dollars at work.
You think people who have too much power become delusional?
Oh, these guys are sociopaths.
Or what about James Clapper, the director of national intelligence, who had the audacity to lie under oath to Congress, to my senator, Ron Wyden, when he asked him, NSA spying on people? Nope. Are you sure about that? Yep. All right.
The irony of that, too, is that Ron Wyden saw the report and knew that he was lying. But because Ron Wyden was sworn to secrecy, because when they show these reports, you're not even allowed to talk to your staffers about it, much less expose what they've showed you. So Ron Wyden was just grilling him, making him lie under oath. And Ron Wyden's just sitting there listening to him lie under oath. And here we are, the guy's still in power, still elected, no repercussions.
I just happened to have this clip handy.
Now listen to this Q&A session with America's most senior intelligence officer from March.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
And it's like Ron Wyden's like, I know you're effing lying to me. I saw the report. Not wittingly. And then what did he say later on in the media? I gave the least untruthful answer I could. In other words, I gave the smallest lie that I could. Good grief.
This, Chris Hedges writes, this spectacle is a rare glimpse into the absurdist theater that now characterizes American political life. It is bread and circus, friends. A congressional oversight committee holds public hearings. It is lied to. It knows it is being lied to. The person who lies knows the committee members know he is lying. And the committee, to protect their security clearances, does nothing. These voyeurs listen to everyone and everything. They bugged the conclave that elected the new pope. They bugged German Chancellor Angela Merkel. They bugged most of the leaders of Europe. They intercepted the talking points of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon ahead of the meeting with President Obama. Perhaps the esteemed opposition can enlighten us to what those security threats posed by the conclave of the Catholic cardinals or German Chancellor and the UN Secretary General, because that's their justification. We have to stop terrorism and terrorism and security threats. You know, they're a threat to our security. Bullshit. They carried out a major eavesdrop effort focused on the United Nations Climate Change Conference back in 2007. Remember when the NSA bugged their ex-lovers and they listened to their wives and their girlfriends? We talked about that. The NSA stores data infinitely, without end. And it's not because they're trying to find crimes, it's because they need everything in the bag for when they come after you. Because they know how bad it's getting. They know that people are going to wake up. They know the dissent and the civil disobedience is coming, and they're getting ready for it. Back to Chris Hedges. He writes, I was a plaintiff before the Supreme Court in a case that challenged the warrantless wiretapping, a case that was dismissed because the Supreme Court of the United States believed that the government's assertion that our concern about surveillance was, quote, speculation. The court said, you've got no standing. You have no right to bring a case. You are speculating that you're being spied on, right? And Chris Hedges and team had no way to challenge this assertion, which we know now is a lie because of Edward Snowden. It's all in cahoots. This is why we got the deep state we talked about in the first hour. And what about that Constitution? What about that Fourth Amendment? The United States Fourth Amendment that says, you know, it limits the state's ability to search and it limits the ability to seize, search and seizure, reasonable, to a very specific time, a very specific place, an event which has to be approved by a magistrate, and it is impossible to square the bluntness of the Fourth Amendment with the arbitrary search and seizure of all of our personal communications. Even former Vice President Al Gore said that Edward Snowden's disclosed evidence of crimes are against the United States Constitution. Even Al Gore says, yeah, Edward Snowden has disclosed evidence of crimes against the United States Constitution. And what was the what is the vow that every employee of the government and every like military personnel, what is the vow that they have to take? The oath that they have to take?
To uphold and support the Constitution.
To protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Right?
Yeah, that's why I love the irony of that when they used to character assassinate him initially, that he broke some sort of oath to whoever the hell he was working for as a government contractor, he broke his secret clearance oath by sharing this secret clearance information, which is ironic because in saying that and to use the character assassination, they omit, and this is the nightly news, of course, his first oath is to the Constitution and not to the company he works for, which is a government contractor, or to his so-called top secret clearance, which is just the irony of all ironies. But that's how the lie of omission works.
Right. And what bothers me is so many people go back to old tactics of appealing to the traditional centers of power and appealing to a non-existent, morality there. It doesn't work that way anymore. And after Edward Snowden leaked these documents that disclosed the constitutional crimes committed by the government, the state, that genuine public, it wasn't until then that the people actually talked about it and actually knew about it. Because it's not like the NSA is going to come out voluntarily and say, yeah, we're spying on all of you and violating the Constitution and your Fourth Amendment rights. You think they would do that? Not so much, right? And elected officials, for the first time, they're promising reform. Hey, look at that Obamacare. Healthcare reform. What reform? The president, who had previously dismissed all of the questions about the state surveillance, insisting that there was strict congressional and judicial oversight, and hey, we have a FISA court, and the FISA court works, right? Since then, there have been 3 federal judges that have ruled on what the NSA is doing on the massive surveillance. 2 out of the 3 said that NSA spying is unconstitutional. 1 of the 3 federal judges says, oh, it's all good. We might have stopped 9/11, so therefore we need to spy on everyone because of terrorism. That's the justification. Hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? None of I want the people to know that they still have 2 out of 3 branches of the government working for them, and that ain't bad.
That ain't bad.
No,
that ain't bad.
We don't
What's
have
that
any
from?
branches
What's
of the
quote?
government working for us anymore. We got 0 out of 3 now.
What's that quote from, by the way?
That is from Mars Attacks and Jack Nicholson. One of my
That
favorite
ain't bad.
movies ever.
It's such a cheesy movie, but yeah, okay.
Oh, it's great. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm easily entertained and amused. So
yeah,
it's an only child thing, I guess. Anyways, and the point is this conversation that Scott and I are having, this debate that Chris Hedges had, none of this would have ever happened, none of it, without Edward Snowden. The point is this...
We'd all just be paranoid.
Yeah, and it would... Oh, you guys...
Now it's like your
tinfoil hat.
worst paranoid... Yeah, your worst paranoid delusions. And when you tell people these things, at least 2 years ago or even a year ago, and even today, because they're still misinformed, they say, oh, no, you're crazy, you're paranoid. No, I'm not. Look at the... Read Snowden documents. Read some Glenn Greenwald articles. Read some WikiLeaks, if you don't mind the NSA watching you. And it's all out there in the open. It's like one of these open secrets that people just are blind to because they don't have time for this. No one has time to ingest this awful truth. They'd rather think that, oh, the government's just dysfunctional and we'll fix it with the next election or whatever. You know, it's just, ugh.
Yeah, they got the judges in the back pockets. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. George Carlin is so concise with all those things. I love it.
And you know, and then you bring up Edward Snowden. Well, you know, he could have done this, and he could have harmed our security, and he could have given the Russians all of our information. Yes, Edward Snowden could have, but he didn't. Edward Snowden had access to the full roster of every single person working at the NSA. He could have made public the entire intelligence community. He could have undercovered assets worldwide. He could have shut down the surveillance system, which Edward Snowden said, quote, in an afternoon, he could have done that. But he didn't do it because he never intended to do that. The only thing that Edward Snowden wanted to do was follow his conscience. He wanted to halt the wholesale surveillance, which until he documented it, was being carried out without our consent or knowledge. And that makes him a traitor because he was looking out for me. Huh? No, I don't get that. No doubt we are going to hear from people who are full of propaganda until the end of time, talking about all the ways that Edward Snowden should have, you know, he should have went to his superiors. He should have made his grievances heard. He should have, you know, shouldn't have exposed it the way he did it. How else would we have found out this information if he wouldn't have done it that way?
Yeah, it's such an ironic thing because let's face it, if, you know, as he says, obviously you look at what happened to Bradley Manning or any of the other so-called whistleblowers, and you know, their lives have been ruined. I mean, they're in jail. What's his name? Julian Assange is essentially in jail in the London, you know, in the embassy in London, and Bradley Manning's doing 30 years, just as an example. And when it happens, if anyone understands the way hierarchies work, hierarchies function top down. You cannot, you know, violence does not go from the bottom up. As soon as you push back against that hierarchy, you cannot push it up the chain. You will be punished with impunity.
That's something, Scott, that we talked about on Filter Free Radio a lot. That, in other words, shit only flows downhill. Shit is not allowed to flow uphill. You understand?
Yeah, I mean, so it's like, he did, and in the documents show that he went to his superiors, and he was just rebuffed, and it's like, oh, you know, you're a bad apple. If you go against the grain, you're a rebel rouser.
Right.
You can't go against the grain. You know, who are you? You're not a person of authority. And that's exactly how it always works. And that's how we have the Daniel Ellsbergs of the world, because their superiors function in the form that they function because they serve the hierarchy. You can't, you know, shit flows downhill only. It does not flow back uphill. And so the whole misnomer of, well, he should have gone internally, that was not an option. In fact, they could have killed him and we wouldn't even known about this guy.
Yeah.
And that's how that would have happened. I mean, Jesus.
And the other thing is oh, well, Edward Snowden came out and leaked all of the documents to the public. He didn't do that either. I can't go online and grab all of the Edward Snowden documents. They're not publicly available. He didn't do that. He went to a radical truth-telling media outlet. Several of them. The Guardian. I wouldn't call the Washington Post a radical truth-telling outlet, but he went to the Washington Post. He went to media outlets and said, hey, look, I mean, here's a story. You got to be real careful with it. Here's the proof behind it, and you should probably report on this story. That's what he did. And then it was up to the discretion of those reporters whether or not to publish his information that he gave them. So the argument against Edward Snowden breaks down any way you look at it, and unless you happen to work for the NSA and your interests are not the same as our interests. But, and then this is how, I love this. This is how Chris Hedges ends his article, which was posted today, Truth Dig, Edward Snowden's Moral Courage. This is how Chris Hedges ended his opening arguments at the debate at Oxford University on Thursday by this quote. He says, no doubt We will hear from the opposition tonight all the ways Edward Snowden should have made his grievances heard. But I can tell you from personal experience that this argument is cogent as the offer made by the March Hare during the Mad Tea Party in Alice in Wonderland. Do you remember that? Do you remember the Alice in Wonderland conversation that they had? Here, he quotes it at the end of the article. Have some wine, the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked around the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine, she remarked. There isn't any, said the March Hare. And that's the end of the article. Do you get it? Have some wine. All you have is tea. I don't see any wine. That's because there isn't any. Oh. Huh?
Yeah, really. That's the illusion. That's the empire of illusion that we live in. I would encourage people. I mean, I love Chris Hedges, obviously. I learned so much from him. His lectures are on YouTube. I posted them on my blog at filterfreeradio.com. The Empire of Illusion lecture. Of course, these are all books. The Empire of Illusion, which is the Death of Literacy and the Triumph of Spectacle, is the subtitle. Of course, The Death of the Liberal Class, which outlines all the way the liberal institutions have failed us and are continuing to serve their own interest in the event to just further their own existence when they no longer function for the ways in which they were established. And then, of course, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, which documents the evisceration of the post-industrial pockets of the United States. And then even going back to War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, which, man, that is a heavy lecture, man. Oh, my God. Because that chronicles his journalism exploits while he was basically gallivanting around the world on the front lines of our empire. And, man, I tell you what, if you listen to War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, you realize that we are empire first and foremost, and everything else comes second. But, I mean, all his lectures, and, of course, even his most recent one, I think, which is probably the most profound, is the okay, now I'm drawing a blank on that one. Oh, it's the myth of human progress and the collapse of complex societies, which is really just the analogy of we are all, of the Moby Dick analogy, where we are all on the Pequod, and mutiny is our only salvation. You know, Ahab, we have to overthrow our own Ahabs.
Yeah.
And it's just, we are, you know, if you look at the history of mankind, I mean, for millions of years, it's one of exploitation and plunder. And like all species, we will go extinct. It may not happen in our lifetime, but extinction is inevitable for all species. So to grasp that harsh reality and then to try and respond rationally to it, I think is one of our greatest challenges, because we have to understand that we are killing ourselves, that climate change is real and it is man-made, and we are making it harder for our own existence by eliminating our ecosystems. And scientific evidence is out there. The University of Hawaii study, I mean, the oceans are acidifying and deoxygenating and warming at rates that aren't even on the scale. I mean, there's this whole cascade effect of climate change where it becomes exponential. And so eventually it just, within a shorter period of time, things become unlivable and uninhabitable. And we have just mass migrations. We're going to have just, in my lifetime, I think, and certainly in your lifetime, Jacob, there's going to be...
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, right. In the next 50 to 70 years, they say, there's going to be just inexorable misery caused on a global scale, and certainly in low-lying areas with the rising of sea levels and the obviously the much more harsher and stronger natural disasters that are becoming, this 1,000-year storm, 100-year storm, oh my God, I have just 1,000-year drought. I mean, all these things that were just like, and then of course no explanation for them on the evening news.
Yeah, right.
But but they're there and they're real, and we have to find ways to buttress ourselves against these things and make people aware of reality instead of following their own electronic hallucinations and their own celebrity gossip and this meaningless information.
I think people get it. I think people are aware. People realize that there are problems. People want to do something about them. And most people feel powerless because they don't understand that, and they don't really grasp the idea that the people have the power. And without the people, I mean, there is no government, there is no corporations, there is no nothing without the people. It starts there. And once you really understand that, and then you grasp the idea that our rights, our beliefs, our morals are being violated, you begin to want to do something about it. And I think that's why the purpose of our program, Filter Free Radio, is shifting from a focus of, hey, let's expose this, you need to know about this, to this is how we change this. This is the means by which we get active. This is how we actually show up and we make a difference. Like our last program, episode 106, Successful Social Movements, talking about how we change it, because people already know that it's bad. And on that note, we're like totally flat out of time, and my fancy pantsy TV thing behind me has croaked. So I want to mention real quick. I forgot to mention. Normally, we touch base with Nicole Bell of Crooks and Liars during this segment, and Nicole Bell emailed me this morning that she's a little bit under the weather, got a sore throat, and so you should check out crooksandliars.com for all of Nicole Bell's stuff that you normally tune in Monday to check out. crooksandliars.com. I wanted to mention that. Got to thank Nicole Sandler for allowing us the opportunity to be in and fill in for her at radioornot.com. I got to thank Scott, my brother from another mother. Couldn't do it without you, man. Thanks to Kenny Pick for thanks to Kenny Pick for syndicating us on Liberal Justice Radio. I want to thank music production people, Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com, danosongs.com. Thanks to you for hanging out in the Radio or Not chat room, for participating in the conversation, for spreading the word and helping us grow. Couldn't do it without you. Much love. If you want to contribute to Filter Free Radio, Jacob at filterfreeradio.com. Email me. Don't forget, we need you to help us participate, help us get active. We need to be the change. Make a difference. Keep up the good fight. We will see you tomorrow back in for Nicole Sandler at radioornot.com, 10 a.m. Eastern. Check out our website, filterfreeradio.com. Peace, love, kick ass, take names, all that good jazz.
Filter Free Radio.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. So give me something to believe, 'cause I am living just to believe, and I need something more to keep on breathing for. So give me something to believe.
The revolution will be broadcast
Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Filter Free Radio.